In this video, I'm going to show you two main ways to shade in Illustrator and two variations on those two ways that you can use in unique circumstances. Now, in this assignment, we're only worried about finding the three main shadow parts, which would be the cast shadow, the core shadow, and the highlight. So I've already kind of identified on these cherries that the light's coming from the upper left, the highlight's near the top, the core shadow's down here near the bottom, even though they are on a light surface and a lot of reflected light is coming up, and a cast shadow is very lightly along the bottom. So I've got here my cherry already shaped out, and the first way that I would create a shadow on this cherry is to use the pathfinder tool. Now, whenever we combine shapes in the pathfinder tool, they're both affected. So I need some extra shapes. I want to keep one original shape here that's not going to be affected by the pathfinder tool. So I'm actually going to copy it with Control C. And then if you look over in my layers, when I hit Control F, you'll have a copy. And I'm going to do it again, another copy. Control F pastes things in front as a front paste so that they are in the exact same location where they started. So now I have three copies of the cherries, and just to make it easier to understand, I'm actually going to give them each different colors just to make it easier to track which is which. So again, we need three copies because one's going to be the bottom layer we keep, and two of them are going to be shapes that we will combine together using the shape tool. So I'm going to put this one right back on top. This middle layer is going to go right back over the keeper, the one that we're going to keep for later. And this top one's going to cover up the space that we want to cut away. So because my core shadow goes around the bottom of this cherry, I'm going to lay it on top of the next one so that I have a bit of core shadow poking out like this. Then all I have to do is select both of them by holding down Shift. In my layers here, you can see that the first two cherries are selected. The bottom layer, the last cherry that we're going to keep, is not selected. Then I need my pathfinder tool, and I will just cut away the front layer, the minus front. So that top cherry disappears, and it cuts away the stuff that it was sharing with the second layer, which gives us just this shadow blended around. Then if we go in and we change the color of that shadow, to make it easier on myself, I'm going to use the eyedropper to grab that color first and then go and darken it. Then we have a basic core shadow around the bottom of this cherry. So you might say, that's not really the shape of the core shadow in that actual cherry. It's too rounded. Real cherries are not that rounded. Okay, fine, if you're going to be that way. To do a custom shape, this is the variation on the pathfinder technique. I would just go back and copy and paste one additional cherry layer on top. That'll act as my middle layer, and I'll color it green again so that we remember that this is the middle layer. Underneath the middle layer is the base we're keeping. And then I can custom draw whatever shape I want to cut away so that it better matches the actual shape of what I see happening on those cherries. So maybe I draw a shadow that's a bit more square along the bottom just because the cherry's not perfectly round. So what I've actually done here is I made the shape over the wrong side of the cherry instead of doing it over the top that we want to cut away. But that's okay. We just use a different setting on our pathfinder tool. So I make sure I have this core shadow shape selected, and I make sure I have the new shape selected. And this time, since they're overlapping on the part I want to keep, I just use this tool, the intersect, and it keeps the part where they share and gets rid of the part where it's gone. And then I can go back again, grab the eyedropper tool, color that the new color, and darken it so that I have a core shadow just like that. This core shadow could do with some adjustments. It's not all that great, but we're going to use that as our example for now. So that is the first technique, using the pathfinder tool to create shadow. The other tool we can use is a knife tool. You might search through your toolbox and say, nope, there is no knife tool. So to get to it, we have to actually change our workspace. We're going to go to Window, and we're going to go to Workspace, and we're going to choose Essentials Classic. That gives you a handful more tools over here, and you can see that one of them is the knife tool right there. So with the knife tool, what we can do is cut a shape evenly in half. We can even cut them in a complicated manner, but it's very free-handed. So I'm going to choose my cherry here. I'm going to go to the knife tool, and I'm going to just draw a line through the cherry like that. And that cuts the cherry into two parts. When I try to select one part, if I try to change it darker, you'll see that the whole cherry changes. They're still kind of considered as a group. These are connected shapes. I assume it's like a compound path. So what we need to do instead is go into isolation mode. So if I double click on a shape, everything else kind of gets whited out and blurry so that I'm focusing only on this section. While I'm here, all of this whited out area I cannot touch. I can only affect the shape that I have selected in isolation mode. So on this one, I can now go and darken just that. And by double clicking anywhere else on the screen, I can exit isolation mode, and now I have a shadow there. I can also use my knife tool to go back in here and carefully cut a line on my leaf that maybe is a little bit zigzaggy, and just slice right through that shape. Then by getting my selection tool and double clicking on this half, I can lighten it up to a brighter green and exit isolation mode, and now I've got a highlight on this leaf. The variation I want to show you on the knife tool is if you happen to have a drawing where you want there to be an outline. Like for example, if my cherry has a thick black outline and I want my drawing to have an outline around it because that fits the style I'm working on, and I go up here and I take the knife tool and slice out my shadow, it looks like it draws a line. It's because each of our individual shapes actually has a black outline around the entire shape. In this case, what we need to do is first separate the outline from the fill. So I'm going to select my shape. I'm going to go up to Object and to Expand. And as long as I have both of these checked, it's going to separate the inside shape and the line. So now you see that I can select just the inside shape, and I can select the outline separately. So what I will do is make sure I have the inside selected. I'll go into isolation mode so that I can just get that. And by grabbing the knife tool, I can now cut, and it only slices the inside shape, where I can then isolate the lower section, darken that up, go out of isolation mode, and the outline is still around the entire thing because it's considered kind of a separate entity now. The other parts that I need to make sure to get are the highlight and the cast shadow. You can either do those with the pen tool or with the shape tool or whatever will make the correct shape. I'm going to simplify my highlight in this picture. Instead of all that highlight in there, I'm just going to make a simple circular or ellipse highlight. I'm going to move it and rotate it to get where I need it to be, and just color it a lighter version of that cherry so that now it has a highlight on it as well. Then we can also do the cast shadow in the same way. We can draw it out with a pen if it's an odd shape, Or since the cherry is round enough when viewed from the light's point of view, we can just draw an oval like that, drag our oval down underneath our cherry, give it a color that is more of a shadow. And it looks kind of like the cherry sitting on a black hole for a minute. So to make it look more realistic, we're going to go up here and we are going to go to Stylize, Effect, Stylized, and Feather. Feather makes the edges soft, and you can change how many pixels you want feathered to make it softer or harder as a shadow. Once you've got it where you want, hit OK. And it's still very dark, so I'll go to my Appearance tab. If you don't see it there, check your window, click on Appearance, and it'll pop up. In my Appearance tab, I have the option to change the opacity. And if I change that where it's less than 100%, the shadow begins to become transparent, and I can make it as light as I think feels natural. So these are the two basic ways I would suggest for now creating shadows on things. I would use the highlights as an individual shape, cast shadows as an individual shape, but for core shadows, I would cut your shapes into sections so you can color each of them differently.